Well, that was disappointing, and honestly, I feel like I could leave it at that. Of course, if I did, there would be questions like what was disappointing about it, to which I would gesture vaguely at the whole thing, and what could the Kraken have done better? Again, pretty much everything. But what the heck, let's do this. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken fall 5-2 to the Calgary Flames at home on the first half of a back-to-back, while the Flames are on the second half of a back-to-back in the last two games that they have before the All-Star break, and the first game that they play without Matty Beniers. And as far as that last thing is concerned, no, there was no discipline whatsoever to Tyler Myers, which I know I said in the video after Vancouver that I would be surprised if they didn't have some sort of discipline against him. And honestly, I'm not. I probably should be, but I'm not. I mean, at this point, what do you want me to say? I mean, sure, I could yell and scream and rant and rave about how it makes no sense that the league wouldn't bother protecting their star players, even outside of trying to protect all of their players. I think we're well past assuming that's going to happen, and especially trying to protect head injuries. But at this point, I mean, if they weren't going to do anything about that hit on Schultz earlier this season, then this hit on Beniers, while still a dirty scumbag hit by Tyler Myers, wasn't as bad as that hit on Schultz. So if they're not going to call that one, I guess at least they're consistent in not calling this one as well. Consistently doing a bad job, but at least it's consistent, which is more than we could say about the comparison of the Alexiak suspension and the Schultz non-suspension. I suppose if you want a silver lining for Myers not getting suspended for the Canucks as a Kraken fan, well, he is in their lineup because he's better than whoever would replace him if he were to get suspended, and the Canucks are not going anywhere near the playoffs this season. So if Myers is in the lineup making their team better and helping them win a couple more games rather than being suspended, then that keeps them farther out of the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, which is a good thing for the Kraken in the long term. So I suppose there's that. Either way, regardless of what could have or should have happened to Myers as far as punishment is concerned for that hit on Beniers, it doesn't make much difference to the Kraken in the here and now, as they're without Beniers for this game as well as the next one, and then we'll just have to see going on to the future. Hackstall wasn't willing to comment on what it could mean for his availability to the All-Star game, much less anything past that. And it's an injury that not only comes to a key member of the Kraken, with Beniers being their first-line center, but also adds to a concerningly growing list by the day of Kraken players that aren't available to play games, as the same day that Beniers goes out, Schultz goes to the IR. And Schwartz, we still don't know. It's still day-to-day as far as he's concerned. I mean, part of their success in the front half of the season was how remarkably healthy they had been, really not dealing with that many injuries. It's now starting to catch up with them, it seems, here to start out the back half of the season, and hopefully that doesn't turn into a trend. The good news, at least, is they will have a week off coming up here for the All-Star break after this one more game against a still very beatable Columbus team who's been more injured than just about anybody. So again, if you want to talk about silver linings, well, it certainly sucks right now and it's far from ideal as far as injuries starting to build up here. Ultimately, the Kraken weren't going to stay as healthy as they had been through the first half of the season through a full 82 games. Injuries were going to happen at some point, and if they're going to happen around the All-Star break where they have a week off and hopefully can get guys back, or at least if they're going to miss time, they're not missing games during that time while they're healing, that at least is about as good of timing as you can get. Although again, it has been a somewhat concerning trend here over these last few days, not only for the Kraken at the NHL level, but also just the day after Beniers went down, Shane Wright also went down in OHL action. Originally reported that he was out indefinitely. It seems like that may have been a bit of an overreaction or maybe poor wording by whoever reported that. It sounds like he's also kind of more day-to-day, did just miss this next game after the injury, but could be back in the near future here, and it isn't something that should affect him long-term when he does eventually come back to the Kraken, probably next season. Even with all of that, though, the team that the Kraken were still able to put out on the ice, given how all of them have played so far this season, was, or should have been, more than good enough to beat a Calgary Flames team coming in on the second half of a back-to-back, who themselves also have some injuries, notably to Chris, Brandon's brother, on the defensive end. And that point is even more slammed home when the first goal slammed home in this game is done so by the one player on the Kraken roster that hasn't been a regular part of this lineup to this point in the season, that being John Hayden getting his first goal as a Seattle Kraken. It's a play that comes about 5 minutes into the first period, as the Kraken had a couple of chances, but it was kind of a sloppy start to the game. Still, the Flames look a bit tired on that second half of a back-to-back, and eventually, as the puck circles around the offensive end, it gets to Borgen out by the top of the faceoff circle. He fires off the shot, getting it towards the net, and wouldn't you know it, good things happen when you take shots at the net, as Hayden's able to tip it out in front, which it either goes through the 5-hole or just over the pad of Vladar behind him, but it gives the Kraken the 1-0 lead, something that they've usually been able to win with. But obviously, they aren't able to do so this time, and weirdly enough, this goal for them turns out to be the big turning point here in the game in the other team's favor, as it is pretty much right after this goal that the Kraken just completely fall apart and play very sloppy hockey for the next 25 to 30 minutes of this game, which turns out to be pretty much their undoing that they're never able to dig out of. First, just 2 minutes after the Kraken score, the Flames on a 2-on-2 rush, with the two for the Kraken being Larson and Dunn. Again, to this point in the season, one of the best defensive pairs in the entire league. But the Flames get past them on what should have been a pretty harmless play, as Larson tries to go to intercept the pass as it goes between the two Flames players, and that allows Lindholm to get past him, and Lindholm gets the pass back, which he's able to tip into the net past Jones to tie the game at 1, just again under 2 minutes after the Kraken took the lead. And off of that response goal, the Flames are able to maintain momentum, which they don't score on for a couple minutes, but do end up getting a power play, which, as far as that's concerned, the officiating in this game was interesting to say the very least, and that goes both ways. Right before this penalty, there looked to be a clear hold or hook, something pretty obvious against Eberle along the boards in the offensive end. Nothing's called there, and then just seconds later, they call holding the stick on Tolvanen, and he heads to the box from the offensive end. Which, to be fair, was a good call on Tolvanen, but it should have never got there in the first place, as there should have been a call on Eberle getting taken to the ice by a Calgary Flames player. I suppose at least the good news, at least in this case anyway, is that the Flames aren't able to score on this power play, as the Kraken do a pretty good job of killing it off. However, just after they kill it off, the Flames getting back into the offensive end create a chance through a passing play that just the Kraken aren't able to get a stick on. Eventually leads to a shot on goal from the slot, which is saved by Jones, but the rebound goes out to the side, where although Eberle does just barely get his stick on it, he doesn't really have enough of the puck to stop Toffoli from putting it into the back of the net to give the Flames the 2-1 lead. At this point, with about 6.5 minutes left in the first, play does pretty much even out through the entire rest of the period, which would sound like a good thing for the Kraken considering how things had been going leading up to that point. But the Kraken also had a power play in the middle of that, which pretty much goes nowhere. So you certainly would have liked to see them, score to even the game back up with that power play, or at the very least get some momentum out of it heading into the first intermission, which they aren't able to do. And then finally, in the final seconds of this first period, the Kraken aren't able to get a stick on the puck in the defensive end, and eventually it gets passed around them out to Zadorov in the slot, who fires off a shot with 5 seconds left. It finds the back of the net, and the Flames get the 3-1 lead heading into the break. Now, looking at the screenshot of this third goal going in with just 5 seconds left in the period, you might be wondering why all 5 Kraken players are well below the faceoff dots, and to that, I have no answer. There's absolutely no reason for whatever the heck is happening here. It's certainly not defense, and it's certainly not like anything we've seen this team do on a consistent basis so far to this point this season, where they've done a pretty good job of locking down that center part of the ice in front of the goal, at least if they're going to allow a shot, having somebody right out in front of it to contest that shot, where here, Zadorov's able to stand right between those two faceoff dots without anybody contesting the shot and fire it off on Jones, who has a couple of his own defensemen or defensive players that should be up contesting that shot, screening him, and the puck finds the back of the net. So then we go to the second period, where the Kraken continue to play sloppy, and I would say that they play sloppily at both ends of the ice, but that would imply that they actually played at both ends of the ice, as for the first 6-7 minutes of this first period, they hardly even get out of the neutral zone, or into the neutral zone for that matter, as they spend the vast majority of it in their own defensive end, occasionally getting the puck a couple feet out of their end, but then immediately turning it over by the center ice line, and it'll go back right into their end where the Flames get a couple more shots. Good news is that the Kraken don't surrender a fourth goal during all of this, eventually weathering the storm, but by the time we reach the halfway point of the game, where the Kraken have already killed off a second Flames power play, the shots are, I don't know, something like 20-8. I don't actually know how many the Flames had. They had plenty. The point is, the Kraken, halfway through this game, have 8 shots on goal. It is also during this period of time, right towards the end of this big push by the Flames, that Gord takes a shot off the inside of the foot, goes down, and does not get up until he's helped off the ice into the locker room. So with the team already missing Schwartz for we don't know how long, Schultz on the IR, and now Beniers out for a couple of games, seeing Gord go down, well, yeah, it just seemed like we were adding insult to injury, especially considering how the team was playing on the ice already. Fortunately, Gord was able to get back out on the ice a couple minutes later and play the rest of the game. We'll just see how he's able to go for the second half of a back-to-back, as I'm sure his foot is not going to be feeling particularly great in the morning. And we all certainly do hope that he can go in that game tomorrow, not just because he's the center of what has seemed like the best line the Kraken have had going during this homestand, but also because of what he brings to the bench. Where, coincidentally or not, but I'm going to choose to believe not coincidentally, when he comes back out onto the bench and back out on the ice after going to the locker room the way he did, that pretty much about halfway through the game is where things start to turn into the Kraken's favor. At least a bit anyway. I mean, at least as far as shots on goal are concerned, again, the Kraken had 8 halfway through the game and finished with 30, so something had to go right here in the back half for them to nearly quadruple the number of shots on goal that they had, basically getting triple the amount in this back half that they got in the front half of the game. Now, yes, that's certainly helped by the fact that they get 3 power plays in the back half of the second period, which they aren't able to score on any of them. In fact, neither team is able to score on a power play this game. The Kraken going 0 for 5 and the Flames going 0 for 2, so the questionable officiating did give the Kraken more time on the power play, but regardless of what any fan thinks of any of the calls made, none of them seem to matter. The good news, though, at least for the Kraken, is that they are able to carry the momentum out of the last minute of the power play that bleeds over into the third from the second. They carry that throughout pretty much the rest of this third period, eventually into another power play, which that power play they do actually end up scoring on. A rebound shot from McCann goes out for Wennberg. Wennberg puts it into the back of the net, but this one ends up getting challenged for goaltender interference, and like it or not, and the fans certainly didn't like it, I think helped out by how the officiating had been going in this game to that point, I think this probably was goaltender interference. Now, you can make an argument, and I think a pretty good one, that even if McCann doesn't make contact with Vladar in the crease here, Vladar probably wasn't going to get back in time to save the Wennberg shot, but McCann does make that contact and Vladar falls over, which he may have done anyway, but again, it's a fairly clear-cut goaltender interference, I think, here. I mean, that having been said, goaltender interference hasn't been clear-cut in any shape, way, or form for anybody so far this season, or really the last couple seasons. Although, even with that being said, it wasn't just because it did look like goaltender interference that I wasn't surprised, but also because everything that could bounce the Flames' way in this game pretty much was bouncing their way. And I don't just mean at the Kraken end of the ice, like with that second goal that they had in the first that rebounded, fortunately for them, off of Jones right to Toffoli just before Eberle could get to it so he could get the goal, but actually even more so at the Flames end, where, again, 22 shots in 30 minutes, the Kraken were getting a lot of offensive pressure here in the back half of the game, and especially in this third period. But any shots that they were getting towards the net, and even some that didn't actually end up being on net that were blocked out in front, if they rebounded off, which there were a lot of rebounds coming off of Vladar, he didn't freeze that many of his saves, but if it rebounded out into the slot, there was a Kraken player next to the net, and then if the Kraken had a guy out in the slot, that rebound would trickle off to the side, and if there was an empty net there wasn't a Kraken player to get to the puck first and put it into that empty net. And then to make matters worse, right after Wennberg's goal is pulled off the board for the goaltender interference on McCann, the puck ends up getting past the Kraken, who try a little bit too hard pinching to try and keep the offensive zone in the remaining power play, and it quickly gets past Dunn and turns into a 2-on-0 going the other way shorthanded for the Flames. A 2-on-0, which Jones is able to make the first save and then get back in time to force the next shot high and off of the net. So the Kraken, mercifully, and thanks in large part to Jones, survive a 2-on-0 shorthanded opportunity for the Flames, which would have then made it 4-1 and put this game pretty much out of reach. Power play does come to an end unsuccessfully, but right as it does, the Kraken keep the offensive end, and eventually they do get the one bounce really that goes their way this entire game that actually ends up counting, as Bjorkstrand fires off a shot from actually a pretty similar spot to where Borgen took his shot that Hayden ended up tipping in the first. Actually, even a worse shooting location than that is he was pretty much right up against the boards when he shoots this puck. It goes off of something in front. I think Vladar makes a save here, but it might have gone off of a defensive body or maybe even a Kraken player. Either way, it goes into a pile of bodies in front of the net, including Vladar, bounces out of that, clear to the other side where Tolvanen happens to be standing where the puck goes to. He gets it, quickly whips around, fires off the shot, and puts it into the back of the net to get his 7th for the Kraken, 9th of the season, and gets the Kraken to within 1. Somehow, after the embarrassing first half of this game for the Kraken and coming up empty on 5 power plays already, they're within 1 goal. It's 3-2. And it stays 3-2 for about a minute and 4 seconds. Actually, exactly a minute and 4 seconds. And the Kraken make another sloppy play in the neutral zone, which leads to an odd man rush. It's 4-on-3, so it's really not that bad of an odd man rush. Certainly not as bad as what we saw a lot last season. But ultimately, it hardly matters as the 3 Kraken players pretty much get caught watching the puck as it's passed around through all of them. 3 passes later, the shot is taken from the slot as they just get walked right up towards the net, and Hanifin scores on that shot to make it 4-2, quickly answering the Kraken pulling to within 1. The Flames make it a 2-goal game, which the Kraken are never able to dig out of. It does seem to take a lot of energy out of their efforts of getting back into this game. They still do get the better of the momentum through the rest of the game, eventually pulling Jones with about a minute left. They had an earlier opportunity that I was kind of surprised Taxtall didn't go to try and pull Jones closer to 2 or 3 minutes down 2. Either way, it doesn't matter, as it doesn't take long after pulling Jones for a puck to bounce weirdly out of the offensive end to the Flames, and it ends up in the back of the net. An empty net goal makes it 5-2, which would be our final score. In the end, then, a game for the Kraken that, I guess you could kind of look at as just one of those nights where nothing seemed to go their way. They certainly didn't play like they deserved to win the game for the first half of it. Honestly, at points we're probably lucky to get out of that first half down just 3-1 after really playing better through the first few minutes up until they score that goal and then just completely falling apart and regressing to kind of the team that we saw last season. They do bounce back, but you need to get at least one of those power play goals on 5 attempts, which they aren't able to do. They do eventually pull to within 1, which I think is a testament to how this team just doesn't give up late in games, even down 2 goals. Eventually, though, they just do come up short as they dug themselves too much of a hole through that first half of the game. And also, there is that aspect of they just couldn't get a bounce to go their way outside of the one bounce they got to go their way that Tolvanen did put into the net. Still, though, when you allow 38 shots on your own goal and a number of those being pretty good scoring chances off of odd man rushes or straight up breakaways, including that 2-on-0, actually both of the breakaways and that 2-on-0, Jones makes saves on all of them, which does keep the Kraken in this game. Again, this wasn't really one the Kraken played well enough to win, even with that late effort in the third period. So for the Kraken, they'll look to just put this game in the past, probably learn from some of the mistakes, but there really isn't that much time to learn from them. I think you just put this one in the rearview mirror and move on to this next game the next day, today as of when you're watching this, as they take on one of the, I'm pretty sure, 3 remaining teams that they've never beaten in the Columbus Blue Jackets. Of course, the good news being that the Blue Jackets are injured more than just about anybody other than the Avalanche this season, and are, at this point, looking to probably get more losses than wins so they can have a good shot at Bedard, as this season has gotten completely away from them. So maybe these teams can just agree to do what's best for both of them. The Kraken get 2 points in the standings, and the Blue Jackets get closer to Bedard. Of course, the players on the ice don't really care about getting closer to Bedard, so the Blue Jackets will also come in on the second half of a back-to-back and be trying to win. The Kraken, though, should still be able to win this game, and honestly, it shouldn't be close, but we'll see what happens. As for Kraken 3 stars in this game, I don't know. This is, well, I guess for the second game in a row, one where it's kind of tough to find 3 guys for stars, but this time for the opposite reason. Last game, I mean, I guess you'd like to go and retroactively give guys that deserve stars in that last one stars in this one, but that's just not really how it works. And while it is kind of tough to find 3 guys, and I'm honestly not sure I'm going to find 3 worthy of stars after how they played in this game, I will give a first star to John Hayden, coming in on short notice for that game against Vancouver, but now his second game of the season with the Kraken, and getting his first goal ever as a Seattle Kraken. And honestly, outside of that, played a pretty good game, certainly better than you would expect from a fourth liner, and was one of the better Kraken out on the ice as far as skaters are concerned, which says something about how the rest of the team's night went. As for a second star, Sprong had his up and down moments. Honestly, I thought he played pretty well for the most part, but had a couple of tough moments in the neutral zone that led to chances the other way. No goals, but still, yeah, kind of an up and down night. McCann, I think McCann played well enough to get a second star, but other than that, yeah, I don't know. I would give one to Gord just for gutting out the rest of that game after taking that shot off the inside of the foot, but honestly, he really didn't have that great of a night. So I think we'll just probably stick with the 2, Hayden and McCann. I think Jones you could maybe make an argument for, especially considering he got hung out to dry quite frequently in this game. And I could also see an argument for Tolvanen or maybe Borgen, but neither one of them had fantastic games outside of getting points. So yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. For me, it's going to be just those 2 stars, Hayden and McCann. And yeah, I think we're all ready to move on to this next game against the Blue Jackets coming up here in a matter of hours at this point, the last game for the Kraken before the All-Star break. So if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that helps support the channel, so I appreciate you using them. And until, well, I guess the next time I'll see you is tomorrow, but later today for the Kraken. Stay safe out there. Good to each other. God bless. Go Kraken.